The bull charges. The boy doesn't move. Every adult screams, but it's already too late. 12-year-old Caleb stands at the fence of the most dangerous rodeo bull in Texas, an animal that's hospitalized 6 cowboys, destroyed 4 chutes, and has 60 days before slaughter. Staff rush forward. Parents gasp. The boy reaches his hand through the rails toward 2,000 pounds of pure rage. But what happens next? Nobody, not the veterinarians, not the rodeo experts, not even the ranch director, could have predicted. Because Rampage, the untamable Brahman who'd rejected every human who tried to control him, does something that defies everything they knew about traumatized animals. When that bull's massive head lowered toward Caleb's open palm, it revealed a truth about trauma, connection, and redemption that would change how everyone understood what broken really means. And what was hidden inside both of them would shock the entire state of Texas. The Brahman bull they called Rampage had earned his reputation through blood and broken bones. In the 3 years since he'd entered the professional rodeo circuit, he'd thrown 47 riders, more than any bull in the Southwest regional competitions. But it wasn't just the numbers that made him legendary. It was the violence. Rampage didn't just buck. He hunted. When a rider hit the dirt, the bull would turn, horns lowered, pursuing with focused rage that sent bullfighters scrambling and crowds gasping. He'd gored 2 horses, destroyed 4 metal chutes by sheer force, and put 6 cowboys in the hospital. The last rider, a veteran named Tyler Hudson who'd ridden professionally for 12 years, had broken 3 ribs and punctured a lung. He'd retired the next day, saying he'd never seen an animal with that much fury contained in muscle and bone. The rodeo promoters loved him. Rampage sold tickets. People came from 3 states to watch riders attempt the impossible, to witness 8 seconds of controlled chaos that almost never lasted more than 2. The announcers would hype his entrance with dramatic music and pyrotechnics, calling him the most dangerous beast in American rodeo, and the crowds would roar. But behind the spectacle, there was a darker truth. Rampage was dying inside. Carter Reynolds, the livestock manager at Red Mesa Rodeo Company in Amarillo, Texas, had been working with rodeo stock for 30 years. He'd seen hundreds of bulls come through their operation, and he knew the difference between an animal bred for bucking and an animal traumatized into violence. Rampage was the latter. The bull had come from a breeding facility that supplied animals to rodeos across the country. His early years were poorly documented, but Carter had pieced together enough to understand. Rampage had been created through methods that skirted animal welfare regulations, kept in cramped quarters, subjected to aggressive conditioning, treated more like a weapon than a living creature. By the time he reached Red Mesa at age 3, his temperament was already hardwired. Humans meant pain, confinement meant rage, and the only response to any stimulus was to destroy. And it was getting worse. After each rodeo event, Rampage's aggression intensified. He'd charge the chute gates even when no rider was present. He'd attack feed buckets, water troughs, anything within reach. The other bulls in the holding pens gave him wide berth, sensing the volatile energy that radiated from his massive frame. At 1,900 pounds of pure muscle, with a distinctive gray-white coat and a hump that rose like a small mountain behind his shoulders, Rampage was physically magnificent. His horns curved forward with deadly precision. His dark eyes held an intelligence that made his violence even more disturbing. This wasn't a mindless beast, but a calculating, traumatized animal who'd learned that attack was the only form of survival. 3 weeks before everything changed, Carter received a call from the company's insurance provider. The liability premiums for Rampage had tripled. The medical claims from injured riders were mounting. The legal department was nervous. "Carter, we need to have a conversation about that Brahman," said Rick Thompson, the company's operations director, standing in Carter's office with a folder thick with incident reports. "He's becoming uninsurable." Carter knew what that meant. In the rodeo industry, an uninsurable bull had one destination: slaughter. The animal would be sold for meat. His dangerous career ended with a bolt gun and a processing facility. "He's our biggest draw," Carter argued, though his heart wasn't in it. "People come specifically to see Rampage." "And we're one lawsuit away from bankruptcy," Rick countered. "Look at these reports. He's not just bucking anymore. He's actively trying to kill people. That's not entertainment. That's Russian roulette with hooves." Carter looked at the paperwork. Rick was right. Rampage had crossed the line from difficult to deadly. But Carter also knew something Rick didn't understand. This bull wasn't evil. He was broken. And nobody had ever tried to fix him. "Give me 2 months," Carter said. "Let me try something different." "Like what? Therapy?" Rick's tone was sarcastic, but Carter didn't flinch. "Retirement. There's a therapeutic ranch about 60 miles from here, Hope Ridge. They work with at-risk youth and rescue animals. It's not a rodeo facility. It's quiet, spacious, run by people who understand trauma." Rick stared at him. "You want to send our most valuable asset to a kid's ranch?" "Carter, this animal is a killing machine. Or he's a traumatized animal who's never been given an alternative to violence," Carter said quietly. "What do we lose by trying? If it doesn't work in 60 days, he goes to slaughter anyway. But if there's even a chance he can be rehabilitated..." Rick was silent for a long moment. 60 days, but Carter, if that bull hurts a kid, that's on both of us. 3 days later, Rampage was loaded into a specialized livestock trailer, reinforced steel, extra space, designed for transporting dangerous animals. He fought the loading process, destroying 2 wooden panels and nearly injuring a handler before finally being secured. The 3-hour drive to Hope Ridge Ranch was tense, the trailer rocking periodically as the bull crashed against the walls. When they arrived at Hope Ridge, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. The ranch sat on 80 acres of rolling Texas grassland, dotted with oak trees and crisscrossed by clean wooden fencing. There were horses grazing peacefully in one pasture, goats in another. A small herd of retired rodeo horses occupied a third area, their competitive days behind them, now serving as therapeutic companions for the troubled children who came to Hope Ridge seeking healing. The ranch's director, Linda Foster, a former child psychologist who'd left clinical practice to create this alternative intervention program, met Carter at the main gate. She was in her early 50s, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much human pain to be easily shocked. "Carter Reynolds?" She extended her hand. "We spoke on the phone." "Linda, thanks for agreeing to this." Carter gestured toward the trailer, which was rocking again as Rampage moved inside. "I should warn you, he's worse than I described." Linda walked to the trailer, peering through the ventilation slats. Rampage's dark eye appeared, watching her with that unsettling intelligence. She didn't flinch. "He's afraid," she said simply. "He's violent," Carter corrected. "There's a difference. Fear and violence aren't opposites, Mr. Reynolds. They're often the same thing, just expressed differently." Linda turned back to him. "We've prepared our most isolated paddock. 2 acres, solid fencing, away from the children's activity areas. He'll have space, quiet, and time. That's all I can promise." As they unloaded Rampage into his new enclosure, a process that took 45 minutes and left everyone involved sweating and shaking, Carter felt the weight of what he'd set in motion. This bull had been engineered for violence, profited from it, defined by it. Could an animal this far gone ever be anything else? Linda seemed to read his thoughts. "You know what I've learned in 15 years of working with traumatized kids? The ones everyone calls hopeless are usually just waiting for someone to speak their language. Animals aren't so different." Carter drove away that afternoon with profound doubt. But he'd given Rampage something the bull had never had before, a chance at a different story. What neither Carter nor Linda knew yet was that the bull's story was about to intersect with another. That of a 12-year-old boy named Caleb Wright, whose own trauma would create an impossible connection that would shock everyone who witnessed it. Caleb Wright arrived at Hope Ridge Ranch on a humid Tuesday morning in late June, his few possessions crammed into a duffel bag that had seen better days. At 12 years old, he was small for his age, barely 5 feet tall, thin to the point of concern, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. His caseworker, Janet Pierce, had driven him the 2 hours from the foster care facility in Dallas, making awkward attempts at conversation that Caleb had ignored completely. This was his 7th placement in 4 years. 7 homes, 7 fresh starts, 7 failures. The pattern was always the same. Initial optimism from well-meaning adults, followed by frustration when Caleb refused to engage, followed by incidents, running away, fights at school, defiant silence that lasted for weeks. And finally, the inevitable phone call to Janet asking for his removal. Hope Ridge was different, Janet had explained during the drive. Not a traditional foster home, but a therapeutic ranch program for hard-to-place youth. Translation: kids nobody else wanted. Kids the system had labeled as too damaged, too difficult, too far gone. Caleb knew exactly what he was. Throwaway. Broken. Unfixable. His mother had died when he was 8, a car accident that took her instantly and left Caleb physically unscathed, but emotionally destroyed. His father, never particularly present even before the accident, had lasted 6 months trying to raise a grieving child alone before admitting defeat and signing over custody to the state. That was 4 years ago. Caleb hadn't heard from him since. The first 2 foster homes had been tolerable, well-meaning couples who tried their best but couldn't penetrate the wall Caleb had built around himself. The third home had been different, a placement that had ended badly, with allegations that put Caleb in therapy and his foster father in jail. After that, Caleb's file gained red flags, warning labels, notes about severe attachment disorder, and trauma response behaviors that made potential placements think twice. By placement number 7, at age 12, Caleb had perfected the art of not caring. Don't attach to people because they'll leave or hurt you. Don't trust adults because they lie. Don't hope for anything because hope is just a setup for disappointment. Better to feel nothing than to feel everything and have it ripped away again. Linda Foster met them at the ranch entrance, her greeting warm but not effusive. She'd read Caleb's file, knew his history, understood that this boy didn't need another adult trying too hard to make him feel special or wanted. He needed space, consistency, and time. Caleb, welcome to Hope Ridge. I'm Linda. I run this place. She extended her hand but didn't insist when Caleb kept his hands firmly in his pockets. Let me show you around. The ranch was quiet in the midday heat. A few staff members were visible in the distance, working in the garden or repairing fencing. Linda explained the basic structure. 8 kids currently in residence, ages 10 to 15, all court-referred or state-placed. School on site during the academic year. Therapeutic activities year-round. Chores, structure, animals, and nature. No TVs, limited technology, lots of physical work and outdoor time. We believe in earned trust here, Linda said as they walked. You'll have responsibilities, feeding animals, maintaining your space, participating in group sessions. In return, you get safety, consistency, and a chance to figure out who you are when you're not in survival mode. Caleb said nothing, his expression blank. He'd heard versions of this speech before. They all sounded good until they didn't. Linda showed him to his room. Small, clean, with a window overlooking the pastures. A bed, a desk, a dresser. Nothing personal, nothing warm. Exactly what Caleb expected. Dinner's at 6. One of the other kids, Mason, will come get you and show you the dining hall. Linda paused at the door. Caleb, I know you've been through a lot. I know you probably don't believe anything I say right now. That's okay. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to trust me. You just have to stay, follow basic rules, and give yourself time. Can you do that? Caleb shrugged, the universal language of foster kids everywhere, meaning, I heard you, but I'm not committing to anything. Linda nodded and left him alone. The first 3 days, Caleb barely spoke. He went through the motions, chores, meals, sessions with the ranch therapist, with mechanical compliance and zero engagement. The other kids tried to include him, but Caleb's wall was impenetrable. He ate alone when possible, avoided eye contact, responded to questions with single syllables. On the 4th day, during afternoon free time, Caleb wandered away from the main buildings. Nobody stopped him. Part of Hope Ridge's philosophy was allowing kids autonomy within safe boundaries. He walked past the horse pastures, past the goat pen, following a dirt path that led to the ranch's far eastern boundary. That's when he saw the paddock that didn't match the others. Heavy-duty fencing, reinforced posts, warning signs posted every 20 feet. Dangerous animal, do not approach, staff only. And in the center of that isolated enclosure stood the most magnificent and terrifying creature Caleb had ever seen. A massive gray-white Brahman bull, easily 6 feet tall at the shoulder, with a prominent hump and forward curved horns. The bull stood perfectly still, facing away from Caleb, his entire posture radiating something Caleb recognized instantly. Rage, pain, isolation. Caleb moved closer to the fence, ignoring the warning signs. The bull's ear twitched, detecting the movement, but he didn't turn. For a long moment, boy and bull existed in the same space, both alone, both walled off from the world. Then Rampage turned his massive head and looked directly at Caleb. Their eyes met across 30 feet of Texas grassland, and something passed between them, a recognition that transcended species. Both had been hurt. Both had learned that the world was dangerous. Both had decided that isolation was safer than connection. Caleb stood there for 20 minutes, just watching. The bull watched back. Neither moved, neither approached. Just two broken beings acknowledging each other's existence. A voice behind Caleb made him jump. "That's Rampage!" It was Danny, one of the ranch hands, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a gentle drawl. "Came here 3 days before you did. Rodeo bull. Hurt a lot of people. Ms. Linda's trying to give him a chance, but between you and me, I don't think this one's salvageable. Too much damage." Caleb looked back at the bull. What'll happen to him? If he doesn't calm down in 2 months? Slaughter. Can't keep an animal this dangerous around kids. Caleb felt something crack in his chest, a feeling he'd been suppressing for 4 years. Anger. Not at the bull, but at the unfairness of a world that broke creatures and then punished them for being broken. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "It's not his fault." Danny looked at Caleb with surprise. These were the most words the boy had spoken since arriving. Maybe not, but fair doesn't much matter when safety's at stake. That night, Caleb lay in bed unable to sleep, thinking about the bull in the isolated paddock, about how they'd both been labeled dangerous, how they'd both been moved from place to place, how everyone had decided they were beyond saving. He didn't know it yet, but Rampage was about to become the first thing Caleb had cared about in 4 years. And that connection, impossible, dangerous, and wholly unexpected, was about to change everything. The next morning, Caleb woke before dawn. He dressed quietly, slipped out of the dormitory building, and made his way through the gray pre-sunrise light to the far paddock. He told himself he was just curious, that he'd look for a minute and then go back. But the truth was something he couldn't quite name, a pull he didn't understand but couldn't resist. Rampage was standing in the same spot as yesterday, a statue of muscle and contained fury. As Caleb approached the warning fence, the bull's head turned immediately, tracking the boy's movement with that same unsettling intelligence. Caleb sat down in the dirt about 15 feet from the fence, far enough to respect the danger, close enough to feel present. He didn't speak, didn't move, just sat there as the sun began to rise, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink. The bull watched him. Caleb watched back. This became their routine. Every morning before breakfast, every afternoon during free time, Caleb would make his way to Rampage's paddock and simply be there. The staff noticed but didn't interfere. Linda had instructed everyone to let Caleb find his own path as long as he stayed outside the fence line. On the 5th day of this silent vigil, something shifted. Rampage, instead of standing at a distance, walked closer to the fence. Not charging, not aggressive, just closer. He stopped about 20 feet from where Caleb sat and lowered his massive head, grazing on the sparse grass near the fence line. Caleb's heart pounded. This was the closest they'd been. He could see the details now, the scars on Rampage's hide, evidence of years of rough handling. The way his muscles twitched, always alert, always ready to defend. The intelligence in those dark eyes that seemed to see right through Caleb's own carefully constructed walls. "They're gonna kill you," Caleb said quietly, his first words to the bull. "In 2 months, if you don't get better." Rampage's ear swiveled toward the sound of Caleb's voice, but he didn't startle, didn't react with fear or aggression. He just continued grazing, accepting the boy's presence in a way he'd accepted no one else's. "I get it," Caleb continued, surprised by his own need to speak. "Being angry all the time, not letting anyone close. It's easier that way. Safer." He pulled his knees to his chest. "But it doesn't stop hurting, does it?" The bull lifted his head, chewing slowly, watching Caleb with those impossibly knowing eyes. Over the next 2 weeks, Caleb spent every possible moment at that fence. He started talking more, about his mother, about the foster homes, about the anger that lived in his chest like a living thing. He'd never told anyone these things, not therapists or caseworkers or well-meaning foster parents. But somehow, talking to a traumatized bull felt safer than talking to humans who could judge, pity, or worse, leave. And Rampage? He listened. Each day, he grazed a little closer to the fence. Each day, his posture seemed fractionally less tense. The ranch staff noticed the change too. The bull who'd been destroying his water trough daily had stopped. The constant pacing had diminished. It was subtle, but undeniable. Linda watched this developing connection with cautious fascination. She'd seen therapeutic bonds form between kids and animals before. Horses especially had a remarkable ability to reach traumatized youth. But this was different. This was a child connecting with an animal everyone had written off as irredeemable. Two beings that the world had labeled as dangerous, finding recognition in each other. On the morning of Caleb's 21st day at Hope Ridge, he arrived at the paddock to find Danny reinforcing the fence posts. The old ranch hand looked troubled. "Morning, Caleb. Got a call from the rodeo company yesterday. They're coming next week to evaluate. If Rampage hasn't shown significant improvement, they're taking him. Time's running out." Caleb felt panic grip his chest, a feeling he'd been numb to for years suddenly roaring back to life. He is better. Can't they see that? Better ain't the same as safe, son. That bull's still got violence in him. One wrong moment, one trigger, and someone could die. After Danny left, Caleb stood at the fence, his mind racing. Rampage approached closer than ever before, stopping just on the other side of the barrier. They were separated by 4 wooden rails and 3 feet of space, but Caleb could feel the heat radiating from the bull's massive body. "I won't let them kill you," Caleb whispered. "I promise." He didn't know how he'd keep that promise. He just knew that for the first time in 4 years, something mattered to him more than his own pain. And that terrifying, wonderful feeling was about to drive him to do something that would shock everyone at Hope Ridge Ranch. The evaluation was scheduled for Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Carter Reynolds would return with Rick Thompson and a veterinary behavioral specialist to assess whether Rampage had made sufficient progress to avoid slaughter. The entire ranch felt the tension. Staff spoke in hushed tones, and even the other kids seemed subdued, aware that something significant was happening. Caleb barely slept Wednesday night. He lay awake running through scenarios, each one ending with Rampage being loaded into that trailer and driven away to die. The injustice of it burned in his chest. This bull was getting better, slower, calmer, less reactive. But better wasn't good enough for people who measured worth in profit and liability. Thursday morning arrived hot and cloudless. Caleb skipped breakfast, heading straight to Rampage's paddock. The bull was already at the fence, as if he knew this day was different, important. "They're coming," Caleb said, his voice tight. "They're going to decide if you live or die." Rampage made a low sound in his throat, not aggressive, almost questioning. At 9:45 a.m., a truck pulled up the ranch drive. Carter, Rick, and Dr. Helen Morrison, the behavioral specialist, stepped out. Linda met them, her expression professionally neutral, but Caleb could see the tension in her shoulders. The group approached the paddock slowly. Rampage, who'd been calm with Caleb, immediately sensed the change. His body stiffened, his head raised, that old defensive posture returning, the stance of an animal preparing for attack. "See?" Rick said quietly to Carter. "Still aggressive, still dangerous." Dr. Morrison observed silently, taking notes. Linda tried to explain the progress, the reduced destructive behavior, the calmer demeanor, the connection with Caleb, but her words seemed to evaporate against the sight of Rampage pawing the ground, snorting, displaying the exact behaviors that had gotten him condemned in the first place. "Where's the boy?" Dr. Morrison asked suddenly. "The one Ms. Foster mentioned who's been spending time here?" Linda looked around. "Caleb should be—" "I'm here." Caleb stepped forward from where he'd been standing behind the barn, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to stay invisible, stay safe, don't draw attention. but Rampage mattered more than his fear. "Young man, you need to step back," Rick said firmly. "This animal is extremely dangerous." But Caleb wasn't listening. He was watching Rampage, and Rampage was watching him. The bull's agitated movements slowed. His head lowered fractionally. The tension in his massive frame eased, not completely, but noticeably. "Caleb, don't," Linda started, but stopped when she saw what was happening. Caleb walked to the fence. Not quickly, not slowly, just steadily, with the same calm presence he'd brought every morning for 3 weeks. When he reached the barrier, he did something that made every adult present hold their breath. He climbed onto the bottom rail of the fence, raising himself higher, making himself more visible to Rampage. Then he began to hum, a melody his mother used to sing when he was small, when the world still felt safe. A lullaby he hadn't allowed himself to remember in 4 years. Rampage's ears swiveled forward, his dark eyes fixed on Caleb. And then, the bull began to walk toward the fence, not charging, not threatening, walking, with purpose and calm deliberation. "Get that kid away from there!" Rick shouted, but Carter grabbed his arm. "Wait!" Carter breathed. "Just wait!" Rampage approached until he stood directly on the other side of the fence from Caleb, separated by wooden rails but close enough that Caleb could see every detail of his scarred face, could feel the warm breath from his nostrils, could see something in those eyes that he recognized from his own mirror, a desperate, buried hope that maybe the world could be different. Caleb stopped humming. In the sudden silence, he spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You're not a monster, and neither am I." Then he did something that would be talked about at Hope Ridge for years to come. Something that made Dr. Morrison gasp, and Linda's eyes fill with tears, and Carter Reynolds question everything he thought he knew about impossible animals and broken children. Caleb reached his hand slowly through the fence rails, palm open, and waited. For 3 eternal seconds, nobody breathed. Rampage stood motionless, this massive creature that had hospitalized cowboys and terrified professionals, looking at the small hand of a 12-year-old boy who'd decided that some connections were worth the risk. Then Rampage lowered his enormous head and gently, impossibly gently, pressed his muzzle into Caleb's palm. The silence that followed was absolute. 6 adults stood frozen, witnessing something that defied every professional assessment about the bull named Rampage. Dr. Morrison spoke first, her voice trembling. "In 23 years of animal behavioral psychology, I have never seen anything like this." Caleb kept his hand steady against Rampage's muzzle, tears streaming down his face. Tears held back for 4 years, finally breaking free. The massive bull remained motionless, breathing slowly, as if this moment was exactly where he belonged. Rick Thompson looked at Carter with shock and shame. "How is this possible?" Linda stepped forward carefully. "Because Caleb understood what we didn't. Rampage wasn't untamable, he was traumatized, and trauma doesn't respond to force. It responds to recognition, to someone saying, 'I see your pain, and I'm not afraid of it.'" After 5 minutes, Caleb slowly withdrew his hand. Rampage lifted his head but didn't retreat. His posture had transformed completely. Relaxed shoulders, even breathing, eyes soft with something like peace. Carter turned to Rick. "We're not taking him. Rampage stays here permanently." "But the liability?" "I'll handle everything," Carter said firmly. "That bull just proved he's not the problem. We were. And I won't admit that some beings are disposable." Dr. Morrison nodded. "My professional recommendation is permanent placement. This animal has demonstrated capacity for trust when given proper conditions. He's not dangerous, he was defending himself." Over the following months, Rampage continued transforming. He was moved to a larger paddock, becoming central to Hope Ridge's therapeutic program, living proof that healing is possible even for those the world writes off. And Caleb? He began healing too. The connection with Rampage cracked open his willingness to trust again, to care again, to believe connection was worth the risk. 2 years later, when Caleb turned 14, Linda hired him as junior ranch hand. He stayed, working with animals and helping new broken kids who arrived angry, just as he once had been. Rampage lived 15 more years at Hope Ridge, touching hundreds of traumatized children who learned that violence is often pain in disguise, and healing is always possible when someone refuses to give up. Nobody could tame the wild Brahman rodeo bull, but a needy boy didn't need to tame him, just understand him, and that made all the difference.